First off, I would like to thank everyone for coming out this evening and allowing me the opportunity to share about potential improvements along the Lincoln Avenue corridor in downtown Goshen. This is the second public information meeting being held for this project. Along with the public meeting held on April 6th, city staff have also met with several groups of residents who are avid cyclists for their input on the project and have also presented the project information to the Mayor's Traffic Commission. It is the intent of this meeting to further provide information to the residents of Goshen about the potential project along Lincoln Avenue and to gather and document any insights or criticisms that could improve the project. I have prepared a PowerPoint to help us walk through some different aspects of this project, and on the screen now is a brief outline of what I would like to cover this evening. First off, I would like to provide a little background information about some of the design concepts involved with this project. Then we'll briefly discuss a big picture view of the project and how the project developed to the point it is at today. Finally, we'll drill down a little bit into the project details and discuss how we would plan to implement the proposed changes. If you have questions, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask about the presentation or about anything related to the project that isn't covered. To begin this evening, I would like to share with you a brief personal experience I had late last summer. Obviously, last summer we were still in the midst of the current pandemic, and my fiance and I were looking for an opportunity to get out and do something a little different. While we walk and bike a good amount in Goshen, on this occasion we decided to drive a little down the road to Warsaw to walk along the lake. After walking for a bit, we decided to stop for a little lunch at one of the cafes that had outdoor seating available. As we sat there, I overheard a short conversation between the waiter and a couple seated at a nearby table. Apparently the couple was in town from Chicago and renting a place on the lake for the week. They were avid cyclists and looking for some trails or a good place to ride. The waiter first told them about the mountain bike trail there in Warsaw, but this wasn't really what they were looking for. The waiter then said if they were up for a little drive, there was a community just to the north that had a bunch of great trails and paths to ride. He also noted that there were a lot of nice shops, but they may not be open due to the pandemic. I found the whole conversation very interesting as it highlighted two things that helped to differentiate Goshen from the surrounding region. And while it was just one conversation that I happened to overhear, it reinforced the importance that we should place on supporting and highlighting the strengths of our community. And this is one of the primary goals of the proposed project. The City of Goshen is not only recognized regionally for our network of bicycle facilities, but also on a national level by the League of American Bicyclists. Goshen was one of 482 communities recognized for its efforts to create safer streets and better bicycling for everyone. The award recognizes the commitment to create transportation and recreational resources that benefit residents of all ages and abilities, while encouraging healthier and more sustainable transportation choices. The Bronze BFC Award recognizes the city's efforts in improving conditions for all people who bike through investments in bike education programs, regular bike events that promote and encourage people to choose biking, pro-bike policies, and bike infrastructure. To further support and develop biking in Goshen, a bicycle and pedestrian master plan was completed in the summer of 2017. A bike-friendly community assessment was included as part of this plan. The assessment identified opportunities for the community to improve the status level with the League of American Bicyclists. Under the engineering subsection, 2 items were identified for potential improvement. First, the need for a complete streets ordinance that mandates the accommodation of cyclists on all road projects was identified. While the engineering department actively seeks to consider and include all means of transportation in potential projects where it's feasible, no ordinance mandating such currently exists. Second, the analysis identified the need for a connected and well-maintained bicycling network, with the focus being on providing connections between many of the already existing assets. There are currently numerous projects in the planning stages that will provide these essential connections. The project proposed in this presentation is one of those projects. As I mentioned in the previous slide, The City of Goshen has chosen to actively implement a complete streets model whenever possible and to embrace a multimodal transportation planning approach. While there are numerous reasons for this approach, including environmental concerns and community health, two important reasons are identified on the slide. The first is that it supports equitable economic growth and inclusive economic development. Providing a network of complete streets allows members of the community to access any asset or to get to their destination even if their choice of transportation alternatives is limited. It seeks to serve residents of all abilities and all age levels. The second is that road diets and complete streets create a more desirable environment and are more conducive to placemaking. In other words, as we've seen on Main Street, it creates a more welcoming environment for gathering, social interaction, and supporting the brick and mortar retail that helps to differentiate Goshen from the surrounding region. On the slide, I've included an illustration from the California Bicycle Coalition that helps to explain a little more about what a complete street is exactly. As you can see, it identifies a space for people and highlights the need for pedestrian routes to be accessible or ADA compliant. You'll note that it also identifies a space for bikes that is separate from both the vehicular travel and from the pedestrians. Finally, a complete street also allows for mass transit along the corridor, which we will touch on a little more later in the presentation. So another component of the project that has been mentioned briefly and that I would like to provide a little more explanation for is that of a road diet. On this slide, you can see photos of a corridor before and after a road diet project. A road diet typically involves converting an existing 4-lane undivided roadway to a 3-lane roadway consisting of 1 lane each direction and a center 2-way left turn lane. A road diet offers a relatively low-cost application that has high-value improvements, including enhanced safety, mobility and access for all road users, and a complete streets environment to accommodate a variety of transportation types. According to the FHWA, additional benefits of a road diet installation may include an overall crash reduction of 19 to 47%, reduction of rear end and left turn crashes due to the dedicated left turn lane, reduced right angle crashes as side street motorists only cross 3 versus the previous 4 travel lanes, traffic calming and more consistent speeds, fewer lanes for pedestrians to cross, and an opportunity to install pedestrian refuge islands. At the bottom of the slide, you will see an illustration of a standard application of a pedestrian refuge island, allowing pedestrians to cross only one direction of traffic at a time. So to this point, we've discussed the importance and priority that should be placed on the corridor cross-section and the complete streets approach by providing space for multiple modes of transportation. Now, I would like to discuss briefly several considerations for what that space could look like for bicycles within a given corridor. The first consideration I would like to look at is the choice of whether to locate the facility within the roadway limits or on a separated or off-road facility. So on-road facilities would include shared lanes, bike lanes, and some cycle tracks. Off-road or separated facilities would entail the use of a rigid barrier between the space for the cyclists and the adjacent travel lanes. An example of this type of facility would be the numerous trails and multi-use paths that we have around the city. While these types of facilities are preferred by many recreational or casual riders, off-road and separated facilities are more costly to construct and typically require significantly more space in the corridor. Often, in downtown corridors, the constraints presented by the limited ability to expand the right-of-way eliminates the possible use of off-road or separated facilities altogether. As far as on-road facilities are concerned, most people are familiar with the concept of a bike lane. Bike lanes require little additional width in the corridor and are relatively inexpensive to implement. However, bike lanes tend to only cater to avid cyclists who are usually comfortable riding on most city streets within the flow of vehicular traffic. A third consideration for cycling space is the implementation of a two-way cycle track. According to the National Association of City Transportation Officials, the two-way cycle tracks dedicate and protect space for bicyclists by improving perceived comfort and safety. They also eliminate the risk and fear of collisions from behind with overtaking vehicles. An important positive to the two-way cycle track is that they have a low implementation cost compared to other possible facilities, while still being attractive to a wide range of cyclists at all ages and abilities. According to NACTO, typical applications for two-way cycle tracks include streets where more destinations are on one side than the other, and thereby eliminating the need to cross the corridor, and as a connection between other bicycle facilities. So that concludes the background information portion of the presentation. Next, we'll move on to an overview of the project and discuss how we arrived to the point we are at today. We'll begin with the Post. For those who don't know, the Post is a nonprofit youth center located on the northeast corner of 6th and Lincoln. The Post contacted the City of Goshen with concerns about students crossing the Lincoln corridor to get to the youth center. Currently, that section of Lincoln has 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, plus parallel parking on each side of the street. The considerable pavement width and 4 lanes of traffic were not only a concern to the Post, but to the city staff as well, as they investigated the number of pedestrians that were crossing Lincoln to get to the youth center. To improve this situation, the city evaluated the traffic volumes and proposed a road diet, condensing the corridor to a 3-lane section between 5th and 8th Street. This project was originally scheduled for construction in 2020. The proposed layout for a portion of that project showing the crossing at the Post can be seen at the bottom right portion of the slide. In addition to the change in cross-section, additional signs were to be placed notifying vehicles of the presence of a crosswalk. When 2020 brought delays to the project schedule, city staff had the opportunity for planning on a larger scale. The next few slides discuss this process. This is a map of the center of the city showing all of the major bicycle pathways. And what we are considering a major pathway in this instance is a pathway that accommodates and is considered user-friendly by cyclists of all ages and all ability levels. In general, these are the off-road or multi-use paths. On the western portion of the map are facilities such as the Northwest Bike Trail, the Plymouth Multi-Use Path, and the Millrace Trail. On the east side, you will note Fiddler Pond, the 9th Street Trail, the newly constructed multi-use path on Kircher, and portions of the Pumpkinvine and Wilden Avenue trails. However, notice the pink highlighted portion in the middle of the map. This is much of what is considered downtown Goshen, and you will also notice that we currently do not have any major bicycle routes that cross it and provide a connection between the networks on each side of the city. So, as we considered this map and the project plan for East Lincoln, we decided it may be worth it to look at the entire Lincoln corridor as a possible location for a connector. As we begin to consider the corridor as a possible connector, we also wanted to take a look at potential destinations along the corridor, as this would be the primary access for cyclists to the downtown. This map is an inventory of some of the potential assets along the corridor. The bold blue lines show the same bicycle facilities we saw on the last map. The multi-use path along Indiana is on the west end of the corridor, the Millrace is near the middle, and the connection to the Pumpkinvine and Wilden Avenue path is on the east end. The green shaded areas highlight the parks along the corridor. The blue shaded areas represent potential commercial and retail points of interest. Linway Plaza is located at the west end of the corridor, the connection with Main Street is near the middle of the corridor, and the River District Revitalization Area is on the north side of the corridor, just east of the river. The dark blue circles represent specific points of interest related to the potential cycle track. Both the Lincoln Avenue Cycling and Chain Reaction Bicycle Shops are shown, as well as the Post Youth Center that was previously discussed. The final item of note on the map is the dark blue rectangle labeled Bus Hub. The City of Goshen is currently working with MACOG to complete a transit expansion study to identify potential alternatives to modify and expand bus service. The purpose of this expansion is to serve additional trolley stops, provide better connectivity, and serve more residents, jobs, and services in the City of Goshen. The map inset at the bottom right of the slide shows some of the preliminary route options being considered. Although it's difficult to see in the inset, each of the possible loops originate at a central location or the bus hub. In the preliminary analysis of the study, it is proposed to locate the hub on the north side of the Lincoln Corridor between 3rd and Main, as shown on the map. So, as can be seen on the slide, a fair number of connections and points of interest could be accessed by cyclists with a bike facility along the Lincoln Corridor. Before we leave this slide, I would like to use this map to highlight one other consideration at this point in the project. As noted previously in the presentation, the right-of-way constraints in a downtown corridor make the option of implementing an off-street multi-use path very expensive, if not altogether impractical. This certainly holds true for this corridor. So that left us with the option of bike lanes or a one-way or two-way cycle track. Looking at the map, if the bus hub is to be located on the north side of the corridor, it would complicate trying to locate a bike facility in the same space. And at the east end of the project, the city is trying to coordinate with the railroad to improve the bicycle and pedestrian crossing along the Lincoln Corridor. This improvement would occur in a future project that is currently in the planning phases and would locate the improved crossing on the south side of the corridor. Connections to the multi-use paths along Indiana and Lincoln west of Indiana, as well as the connection to the Millrace Trail, are all also located on the south side of the corridor. Considering the location of these assets and the fact that the two-way cycle tracks are considered more user-friendly by the casual or recreational cyclist compared to bike lanes or on-street riding, we decided that the two-way cycle track was an important option to consider for further analysis. So, at this point in the project process, we realized that the potential existed to convert Lincoln to a complete streets corridor with a road diet and the addition of a cycling facility and future bus hub. The next step in the process was to bring on board a consultant who could provide expertise and feasibility analysis for the project. Based off consultant proposals, the engineering department selected Progressive AE to complete the study. Progressive staff member Chris Zoll had significant experience in non-motorized facilities and provided a lot of guidance and insight into the development of the project. Chris has over 18 years of experience as a transportation engineer and spent 15 years working for the city of Grand Rapids. While at the city, Chris managed the traffic calming program and implemented numerous road diet projects and developed over 80 miles of on-street bike lanes and cycle tracks. So to complete the study, Progressive first obtained traffic counts and completed a capacity analysis of the corridor for both the existing and the proposed conditions. The schematic at the top right of the slide shows an example of this analysis that was included in Progressive's study. Progressive then used the analysis to determine the level of service at different points along the corridor. In the level of service table shown on the slide, the first set of data is the existing condition. The proposed conditions for alternate 1 and alternate 3 in the middle column refer to bike lanes and one-way cycle tracks, and the proposed conditions for alternate 2 in the last column refers to a two-way cycle track. To better help explain what is being represented in the table, I'll explain a little bit more about the level of service concept. Level of service simply looks at the average delay experienced by a vehicle and is based off the type of intersection. It assigns a letter A through F accordingly, with A being minimal delay and F being significant delay. Levels A through D are usually considered acceptable, E is considered borderline, and F is considered failing. In fact, most new facilities are only designed to meet a level of service C. Designing a new facility to a level of service A can often be considered to be fiscally irresponsible, as it is typically very expensive to minimize driver delay to that extent. As you can see from the table, while the project options do reduce the level of service slightly at points along the corridor, all points are at a level of service C or better. The last table displays the travel time expected for the corridor at different points in the day. For the most part, the proposed options do not have a significant impact on the travel times, with about a 30-second increase being the worst that would be expected. One important thing that I would like to note, though, about the travel times from the report data is that the slight increase in travel times and driver delay are primarily not a result of the proposed lane reduction, but more a result of the tweaks to the signal timing necessary to accommodate the bicycle signal heads. We will discuss these more in a moment, but these are very important safety components to the project. So the final step for Progressive was to help the city implement and report the report findings by providing specific advice on the design and the layout of the corridor. And this we will cover a little bit more in the following slides. So diving a little more into the scope and details of the project now, based off the study findings, the engineering department has opted to utilize a two-way cycle track option in further developing this project. The cycle track can be seen on the left or south side of the corridor in the typical road section at the top of the slide. In addition to the cycle track, the selected option includes a 3-lane section with 1 lane each direction and a 2-way left turn lane in the center. The section shown here is just a typical section, and the widths of the various components do vary throughout the proposed corridor. There is also a portion of the corridor between 3rd and the Elkhart River Bridge where it is proposed to maintain the existing 2 westbound lanes. Pavement markings will be the major component of this project and will be instrumental in providing guidance to both cyclists and vehicular traffic. The cycle track will be delineated with longitudinal white striping with a hashed adjacent area to provide separation from the adjacent travel lane. Bicycle markings with directional arrows within the limits of the track will clarify the intended use for the area. Delineator posts will also be placed in the hashed area to provide further definition and guidance in the corridor. Green shading will be used to warn both users and drivers of potential path overlaps. These areas would include intersections or major commercial drives with significant vehicular traffic. An example of these markings can be seen in the picture on the bottom left of the slide. As noted earlier, bicycle signal heads that are separate from both the traffic signals and the pedestrian signal heads will be an important component to the implementation of this project. Separate signal heads for cyclists makes it much easier to see the signal and much clearer as to which signal the cyclist should be adhering. The separate bicycle head also allows for slightly different timing than the main traffic signal, allowing a small head start for the cyclist to be programmed into each green phase. This allows the cyclist to enter the intersection prior to the vehicles being permitted to encroach and increases the cyclist's visibility, primarily to vehicles attempting to make a right turn. The implementation of the cycle track and the bicycle signal heads will require a vehicular left turn lane at every intersection. This allows for a protected left turn phase for the vehicles while the cyclists are stopped and prevents the path overlap that would exist with permissive left turn phasing. Cyclists that would like to cross to the north side of the Lincoln Corridor at any intersection will use a 2-staged approach to do so. This approach is explained in the 2 illustrations on the slide. A cyclist traveling along the cycle track and desiring to cross the corridor will proceed to the green bike box during the green phase for the Lincoln Corridor. The cyclist then waits there for the end of the green phase and for the subsequent green phase along the intersecting corridor. At that time, the cyclist would proceed across the corridor with the vehicular traffic along the intersecting roadway. While this approach is somewhat inconvenient to the cyclist, it has proven to be by far the safest approach for all users of the corridor. The last item I would like to cover about this project is the remainder of the project development process. The engineering department has decided to go with a phased construction approach to this project. The reason for this is twofold. First, while a road diet is relatively inexpensive compared to most projects the city tackles, the ability to phase a project allows it to fit much more easily into the budgetary constraints. Secondly, the engineering staff understands that a two-way cycle track will be a new concept to many community members, and constructing a smaller portion on a selected portion of roadway will allow users to become more familiar with the concept while still adding utility to the corridor. The selected section for Phase 1 will be from Indiana to roughly the Elkhart River Bridge. This completes the connection between the Indiana Avenue multi-use path and the Millrace Trail. Phase 1 is preliminarily estimated to cost between $150,000 and $200,000. Phase 1 is scheduled to be constructed this year, with project bidding expected in early July. Construction is expected to be complete by early October. The exact schedule for subsequent phases has not yet been determined, but they will not be completed this year. So that wraps up the presentation of this project. The last slide that I will leave you with is a preliminary layout of the corridor with the cycle track and the road diet implemented. So I'll leave that on the screen here while we answer any questions that you might have.